Welcome back. So yeah, I'm heading out now from work. It's gonna be a little bit late because I'm heading north, and I had a lot of stuff to do, and I finally got a new graphics card for my computer, and it turns out that that's what was causing a majority of my problems. The GPU was on the fritz, and so I was able to back up all my video files and then install the new graphics processor. So hopefully, now that I have a stable computer, I'll be able to continue editing my videos a little bit more effectively. But yeah, so that all of that caused a delay, so I wasn't able to get into work early, and so now I'm leaving a bit later, which obviously it means there's traffic, and then of course it just means that minimum the trip north, it takes about 10 hours. Your average trip speed in a Bull TV, given the current infrastructure, is about 50 miles an hour, including the time spent charging. So yeah, it's gonna be a fairly late night going 500 miles. I'm taking a back route, which it's technically slower in terms of road speeds and everything, but it gets much less congestion at this point in time because you have a huge amount of people in LA trying to crowd the freeways getting back home, and so this route gets me past a majority of that congestion. And plus there's I guess it must be a pretty bad accident on the 118 freeway going eastbound out of Ventura County. So according to Google Maps, it's about a 40-minute delay. So, or at least it's 40 minutes slower than this alternate route that I'm taking. So anyway, welcome aboard, and yeah, I'll try and highlight the parts of the trip that I find most interesting. And this is a 2-lane highway coming out of Moore Park, California, in eastern Ventura County. And so, being a 2-lane highway, there aren't really opportunities to pass, and but it's a fun road to drive. It's just crowded. Luckily, most of the people who drive it know the road, so the number of problems on it are very few. 23 north. Here we go. Be the most interesting aspect of this drive anyway is what they refer to as Grimes Canyon. So this is Grimes Canyon Road. It's, most of, like I said, the locals know about it. It's funny, the range of experiences. Some people absolutely love this road and go out of their way to drive it, while other people I've spoken with are they're actually scared of the road. They don't like being on it. I guess maybe they, for whatever reason, some people don't like driving canyon roads that are narrow without any guardrails, and cliffs that are hundreds of feet, or ravines, I guess, that are hundreds of feet down. I actually really enjoy these roads. I grew up driving roads like this, so for me, I would rather be driving this road at 30 miles an hour than a freeway at 70. But unfortunately, it looks like I will be driving this road at 30 miles an hour. So we're coming into Fillmore, California, and I was gonna say, you'll note one good aspect of following a semi truck down a canyon is the efficiency tends to be very, very high. You know, we're 11.6, we're 6.7 miles to the kilowatt hour right now. You know, so that won't last, but yeah, this section is pretty good, and this is sort of a accumulation of data over time, but typically it would be 1.9 to 2.0 kilowatt hours that I'd use coming into Fillmore, but I have noticed an improvement going up and over hills since putting the Cruise Eco rims on, which save about 5 pounds per corner over the stock Bolt EV LT rims. That might be more or less with the Premier. I haven't had a chance to weigh them, and I don't know anybody who has. So exiting this way isn't without its perils. Right? You have a lot of semis on the road, and so you're still sort of stuck. You're stuck with them, and that they sort of crowd up the road a little bit, and it's only 2 lanes each direction. But yeah, it's another 17 miles or so up to before we get on Interstate 5, and I've already programmed in the destination where my first stop, I typically like to stop in Selma, California, and part of the reason is it has 2 CCS and CHAdeMO adapters, so it's much less likely that you're going to get blocked. And I also noticed it just appears that that's a location that's maybe used less often. So, and plus, notice the time. Depending on when I leave from work, I'll be getting that. I get there anywhere from between 6 and 8, sometimes as late as 8:30. But that's a perfect sort of time to stop for dinner. And so what I'll do is I'll drive there because I have the full battery, which will allow me to do about 210 to 220 miles, typically at high freeway speeds. And so right now on here, we're already 16 miles into the trip, and it's 183. So yeah, it rounds out to pretty close to 200 miles. If I look at my min indicator on my range estimator, it shows that I have a minimum range of 200 miles. Well, the thing is that I'm not going to trust that right now because I've been very efficient up to this point, and as we go over the grapevine and the Tehachapis, that's a very intense climb over a hill. So I'll be maintaining, sort of watching what my estimated range is, and the other side of that though is, I guess literally, we come down the far side of the Tehachapis and we'll recoup a lot of that. So usually what happens is the minimum range drops to about the distance that we have left to go, and then you crest the hill and you start getting a bunch of that range back, and you get a lot more efficient, and by the time you arrive you usually have, like I said, 10, 15, 20, 25 miles of range left, depending on conditions. And here we are finally heading into Santa Clarita. Now this is a location where Six Flags is, if you're interested in theme parks and roller coaster rides, the thing is that's good about this route, right, is it takes me directly onto Interstate 5, and it bypasses a lot of the traffic that comes from Los Angeles up into Santa Clarita. And it also bypasses an additional grade. Now, for me, it's not that big of a deal, because either way, I'm still going up and down. The net elevation gain is the same regardless. So from an efficiency standpoint, not a huge difference. If there were no traffic, it would be faster to take that route because it's literally, 65 to 70 mile an hour freeway all the way. But because this route bypasses traffic and accidents and things like that, it's actually a much faster route for me to take. And right now, it's not really showing me the traffic data for the interstate south of where I'm going to be getting on. But a lot of times when you look at the traffic data, you see it's just red. So yeah, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to get to this point as quickly. It's just too much traffic. So and hopefully I'm not following this dump truck onto the freeway. Anything is possible, but it's not ideal. Because this road will go, on through Santa Clarita and out the other side. So hopefully that's where he's going. Whammy, whammy, whammy. Sweet. So yeah, so now we can just go onto the on-ramp like we would normally do. And actually, I had to do a quick check. I didn't know if I had full regeneration available yet. I mean, I typically do, just because it's such a long drive on. There's an I-3 stranded on the side of the road, so hopefully he's okay. Assuming calling a tow truck if not, or maybe just an emergency personal call. But yeah, you get services pretty easily on these freeways. I mean, unless you actually see someone in some sort of peril, you're not gonna pull over. Typically, it's more dangerous to do that than it is to just let emergency responders and tow trucks respond. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it's a long enough drive that full regeneration is typically available, and what I've noticed is, depending on temperature and a few other factors, the light on the regenerative braking indicator goes full green, typically after somewhere between 3 and 3.5 kilowatt hours have been used. The reason I find that so curious is Hilltop Reserve mode blocks out 6 kilowatt hours. So you're not only already in full regen, you're like way into full regen. So my assumption, like on the design reasoning behind that, is that they figure if you're at the top of the hill, you could still regenerate as much as 1 or 2 kilowatt hours of energy coming down. So even as you get toward the bottom of the hill, you're still going to have full regeneration available. I can't remember if I've done a video from this side of the Tehachapis going up, but here coming out of Santa Clarita, this is sort of the big grade that you have to get over, and this is where a lot of people end up slowing down. So there's not a whole lot of traffic right now, so clearly I'm, doing close to the posted speed limit, and some people just don't care. But then some people might just be taking a running start. Also, we saw that I-3 that was sort of disabled on the side of the road. Who knows what happened, right? Like it could be any number of factors. But that internal combustion engine vehicles aren't immune to that sort of thing. The last time I made the trip up, it was during one of our hot spells, and I think the temperatures were between 105 and 110 degrees going up this grade. I saw literally dozens of internal combustion engine vehicles stranded on the side of the road. Basically, one of the things that one of the advantages internal combustion vehicles have during wintertime is they produce a lot of excess heat, and that heat can be used to warm the cabin, right? I mean, it's wasted otherwise, but at least in winter it's not. But that also creates a weakness for internal combustion engine cars during summertime, because part of their system, their radiator, is actually built to disperse that heat. And when you're creating a huge amount of heat in an already hot environment, it makes it very difficult to disperse the heat. And so what you see on hot summer days is a lot of these ICE cars are just, stuck on the side of the road. They overheat. And usually part of the problem is they're running their air conditioning compressors, which is adding even more heat to the system because it's trying to cool the cabin. And so everybody, has their air conditioning on, and that starts to overtax their system, and then it's just a cascading effect. So I do find that interesting that in many ways in summer, electric vehicles, at least those with sufficient sized batteries, have a major advantage. Why are you going to be stopping at a radiator water? Like it doesn't make sense. Just does not compute. But again, luckily, it seems like we don't have a whole lot of slow pokes. I am catching up to a Prius, it looks like, which typically happens. They're very slow going up the hill, and then they go into freewheel mode coming back down, and they usually pass you doing like 95 miles an hour. But otherwise, most people, if there's no traffic, will try to keep up a pretty good flow. And I mean, I'm catching the pack now with my cruise control on, but usually there's a slowdown way before this. And we're entering the Angeles National Forest. There's a tree, thank you very much. So yeah, this gray Prius is probably going to pass us in excess of 25 miles an hour when we go back down a hill. Watch this space. Okay, so we're not at the highest point yet, but for now we are. I believe we're coming up over where Pyramid Lake is, if I recall correctly. So basically we've made it over the first initial grades. Now, what I was going to note is I still have 155 miles to go to get to Selma, and I'm going to get in front of this guy who's probably not maintaining his speed, but I don't want to block out the left lane. Anyway, 155 miles to go to get to Selma, and right now my range estimator indicates 136 miles of range, at least at the minimum. Now, based on what I know, I'm going to be going back downhill again. I'll be recouping a huge amount of that, and it's going to flip-flop. But these are the things that you just have to kind of know going into it when you're taking a trip. It's not a huge deal, right? And I know a lot of people who don't really pay attention to elevation when they're driving, say, an internal combustion engine vehicle, but I always enjoyed that. Even when I was a kid, it didn't really matter. It had nothing to do with driving or range or refueling. I just liked to know what elevations we were at, why my ears were popping, and those sorts of things. So it's always just a fun thing, even if it was just novel, right? It was something for me to keep track of. And my suggestion for electric vehicle owners is start paying attention to that. It's not an absolute requirement, but no, right? Like my recent trip to the Grand Canyon, to Lowell Observatory, it's important to know that when I woke up in the morning in Needles, California, I was at 600 feet above sea level. By the time I ended my day in Williams, Arizona, I was 6,700 feet above sea level. That makes a huge difference because that's a huge amount of energy that you have to put into getting up that hill. So this is the same way, except in this instance, I'm not going up to an elevation and staying there. I'm going up to an elevation and then coming back down again. Sorry, that was a large chunk of tire. Oh well. Man, I hope that guy didn't hit part of it. Might have, actually. Okay, so here we are. I guess this is where Pyramid Lake is, so it's a little farther along. It's just something off the cuff I was thinking about. Is I noticed a post in PlugShare as I was just checking the chargers along this route, just to make sure that there wasn't any sort of maintenance going on or anything like that. And ooh, that's a lot of diesel smoke. Anyway, I noticed there was a post by a Fiat 500e driver, and I guess they had stopped at the chargers, the EVgo chargers at Walmart in Bakersfield. And the configuration of those chargers, it's only DC fast chargers. There's no level 2 hookup there, so it sort of breaks their format. And so the person posted in PlugShare, there's no adapter that works. And I kind of feel for the person because they bought a Fiat 500e. They're very popular cars because they're super cheap, right? You lease them for less than $100 a month. But in terms of capability, they like when people say an electric vehicle is a city car, they're talking about the Fiat 500e. You can stick within a city area pretty easily. You're not going to fast charge. Maybe you charge at work and at home, whatever. But yeah, it's not really that capable of a long-range vehicle. Now, but it got me thinking because I saw a recent video by Tesla Bjorn, and he was testing out the e-Golf. And I didn't realize this, but apparently the e-Golf doesn't have like active thermal management for the battery, and that's a big deal because I'm thinking about some of these. There's still short-range electric cars, but you have the Nissan Leaf, even the new one that's coming up with 150 miles of range. You have the e-Golf, and you have things like the Fiat, but Fiat, it doesn't matter as much because it doesn't have a fast charging plug. But as Tesla Bjorn was driving on one of his regular routes with his e-Golf, he ran into problems because the battery wasn't actively cooled. It had to start throttling his charge rates. So if you're a driver like me, so maybe that the new Nissan Leaf that's coming out, maybe that 150 miles of range is just barely enough to cover my regular driving. All right, fine. But when I make a long trip like this, it means I'm going to have to stop at least 4 to 5 times and fast charge along the route. Without active thermal management, that's putting a huge heat tax on that battery, and it increases over time. And if that battery has to either accept a lot of damage or start slowing the charge rate, it makes it much less capable of a long distance trip. And that's one more reason why I feel like a car like the Hyundai Ioniq Electric is probably a better option for many people than even the new 150-mile Nissan Leaf. That 20-25 mile difference in range is overcome by a myriad of ways in which the Hyundai Ioniq EV is superior, especially if you're someone who drives a lot. Now, of course, then you also have the option of something like the BMW i3. The non-Rex, if you want to be pure and not use fossil fuels, the i3, at least it's got active thermal management, so you're going to be stopping that same 5 or 6 times along the route like I'm driving, but it requires you to have a very robust infrastructure, because you're going to need the stops every 70 to 80 miles, and maybe 100 miles at most. And then with the range extender, you can manipulate that a little bit and be able to drive farther and faster. But I think it's an overlooked aspect of electric vehicles that people need to think about. If they're going to drive a long trip and rely on even a well-built out fast charger network, they need those batteries to be thermal managed to be able to accept the constant fast charging that they're going to be doing to have any sort of a decent trip speed. So we're getting ready to make that final push up the Tehachapis, up over Tejon Pass. We see an accumulation of trucks. But yeah, we're getting ready to head up that direction now. Well, hey, there's a Prius with a running start. Never gets old. Anyway, so this isn't really that significant of a grade. It was just 3,000 feet not too long ago, and the summit is like 4,100 or something like that. So, but sometimes you can get some pretty gusty winds, and so that can kind of get in the way. And then now you see, like, the efficiency really has dropped, right? I've used 18 kilowatt hours now to go 60 miles basically. The efficiency is around 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. And then the other thing is, so I have 139 miles to go, and I'm down to 116 miles of estimated range. So yeah, you just, again, keep track of a lot of these things, and keep your eyes on the road. Okay, and speaking of wind, I am getting buffeted by the wind a little bit, but feels like it's mostly a headwind. It really is hard to tell with the Bolt EV where the wind is coming from, because you feel it pushing on you, but it doesn't really respond the same way as a normal high-profile vehicle would respond to wind. So like I said, it's more like you feel the force, but it's not really like rocking you or anything of that nature. Your stability isn't really affected. So I guess based on the trees, it looks like it's probably almost a headwind, but yeah, like a quartering headwind. So actually, it's shifting, but maybe even close to a crosswind. So I'm gonna yeah, or it's it's just shifting, because now I can feel it more as a crosswind coming across. And of course, this is where you really need to watch the semis. Okay, so I thought this was Tejon Summit somewhere, but I'm missing the sign. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, oh, there it is, Tejon Pass, 4144. So, notice I got up to 20.3 kilowatt hours used as I sort of crested. 104 miles of estimated range, and I have 135 miles to go. So what's happening now, coming down into Fraser Park, I'm regenerating a bit, and you know, it'll level out, and then the actual real steep decline comes in, and then that's where you really regenerate a lot of your energy. Based on the wind that we encountered, it was coming out of the north. Now, it doesn't mean really that much, because the winds in the canyons up here shift so much at the top of the mountain. So I'll wait to see when you get down into the valley below. It'll be important to note where the winds are coming from, because if they're coming out of the north, it means I'm basically driving into a direct headwind. It might not be as intense as it is up here, but it could still be significant, 10-15 miles an hour. And now we're about to make the big descent. According to the sign, it was 5 miles of 6% grade. You know, I'm down to minimum of 110 miles, and I have 131 to go. If you look here, we're basically 0.1 kilowatt hour above what it was when I crested the summit, right? So we're at 20.4 kilowatt hours. So it's interesting, you know, to see just how much you recoup going down. And actually, I've never checked this, but from that point to the base of the hill, it'd be interesting to see what the elevation decrease is. Also, one thing I have noticed is that that even after you get to the base of the hill, you continue at a slight elevation decrease for probably 20 or 30 miles toward Bakersfield or north on Interstate 5, which actually really does a number. Like it really improves your efficiency as you're heading north. Of course, the counter to that is if you're heading south, you're going uphill for 30 miles before you even get to the Tehachapis. And now the regeneration commences. Okay, now the regeneration commences. Sorry, there's a lot of little dips in it. Yeah. And again, I have to watch the semis because they'll occupy the right 2 lanes, but typically people feel liberated by the excess power, and yeah, you have to leave the left lane open because people will pass you doing 80 to 90 miles an hour easily. I will say this, just in my experience with electric vehicles, while regeneration is great, it actually does take a lot of regeneration to even equal 1 kilowatt hour of energy back into the battery pack. This is basically like double the speed of a level 2 charger right now. The other thing that you'll notice as we come down into the San Joaquin Valley, and this is, you been a constant for a while now. The air quality is very, very bad. Yeah, this one semi is getting feisty. The air quality is really, really bad. We've had fires, which could account for some of it, but it doesn't seem to matter. Perennially, you're going to deal with terrible air quality. And if you happen to live in the San Joaquin Valley, you might not realize this, but there could actually be an additional electric vehicle rebate program for you, because they recognize how bad their air quality is, and there's a need to improve it. Given how remote it is, and I understand why a lot of people haven't really been enamored with the electric vehicle options they've had thus far. Either the Teslas are way too expensive, or the other electric vehicles aren't as capable. The Bolt EV is actually a very good option for this rural portion of California. Oh man, the smell of clutches burn here. Oh Lord. Whew. When they make these things electric, truck drivers are going to love it. No burning clutches, no burning brakes. Oh God. It's terrible. Why do you even need to smoke anymore? So we're down at the bottom, and yeah, it looks like we've pretty much recouped about 1 kilowatt hour from the summit. So that's groovy. Actually, so let's see, my minimum range is now up to 127, and we have 124 miles to go. Awesome. So, and like I said, the efficiency actually tends to be fairly good even at this point, and certainly not anywhere near as bad as going up the hill. And I believe the min and the trend bars will continue to stay a little bit higher than what's currently listed as the estimated mileage. Yeah, so, and of course the other awesome part about this is it's it's a 70 miles an hour freeway. Now, one thing to note, they're saying, they're saying stay on I-5, but we know better. We're actually taking Highway 99 to Bakersfield. Stay on 5. I mean, they might think there's a traffic incident. No, yeah, we're going to be going on Highway 99. So there's nothing really to report. Just the sun is going down, so this is probably the last chance for some actual lighted footage on the way up. But it's also important to note that we still haven't gotten to Bakersfield yet. I think it's easy to forget the enormity of the state of California. So yeah, I think we're still a few miles outside of Bakersfield, and yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what it's like for the next 6 hours of driving, basically 5 hours of driving. It's going to be pretty much the same thing. Yay me! Well, welcome to Bakersfield. I watch the speed limit signs just because I know it reduces down to a 65 mile an hour zone or something like that fairly soon. But I was gonna say, so Panama Lane, right? That's Bakersfield actually now has a few fast charging options, or I should say a couple, right? So Panama Lane there's a Walmart, and at that location there are 2 dual CCS Chatamo plugs. That's the one I believe the Fiat 500 e-owner stopped at and couldn't find a plug because there's no J1772 adapter. So that's one option. But I was also actually very happy to see that a credit union in Bakersfield had installed a charge point V-fill station, the Tritium station, and that's their 125 amp with a CCS and a Chatamo adapters. So that gives another option. It's farther north in Bakersfield. I don't know the exact exit where you would get off to access it. I've never gone before, but I might on one of these trips. And the thing is, another good reason for it is that charge point is actually, if you go by the Bolt EV's charge rate and everything else, it's actually cheaper to use that than it is to use the EVgo chargers, even with the membership, right? So, like, I wouldn't stop there right now. We just passed one DC, like the EVgo DC fast chargers. I haven't even used 50% of my battery yet, so it would be a complete waste to stop here. And you know, like in harsh weather conditions, maybe. But that's the other thing I was going to mention is I'm going to drive this route less often, probably from this point in time in the year forward. And the reason for that is as winter weather starts to come into California, going over the Tehachapis is going to become more of a hassle. And for me, it's actually faster and easier and more convenient to go up Highway 101, which is next to the coast, so it has a more stable seasons. It'll still get cold, it'll still get bad weather, but nothing like trying to go over a 4,000-foot mountain in a snowstorm. Well, red sky at night, traveler's delight. And the road keeps going. Yay! We're racing a train or something. Oh, yeah, they're not very fast moving. It's gaining on us, boys. Woo. So much cargo. So we're coming up on Delano, California, and you know, it's a little town in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley, but they have a Walmart there, and at that Walmart are 2 EVgo chargers, and at those EVgo chargers are, you know, a CCS and a Chatamo plug each. But anyway, yeah, the thing is, I don't know, and this is a stop that I will sometimes make, but really I actually don't ever make this stop in Delano anymore, because I actually, it's only relevant if I leave without a full battery, right? So if I happen to be heading up this way after I've done some driving, then I might need to stop here. But yeah, if the intersection where I usually pull off, I think is about a mile from here, a mile and a half from here. But again, I'm barely over 45% of the battery used, so stopping here doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I will say though, I do like it as a stop. It's typically when you have a shopping complex like a Walmart, you have other businesses like food in particular, and that's the number one sort of retailer or business I think needs to be near DC fast chargers. But you Walmart's, I don't know if EVgo has some sort of a special relationship with Walmart, but if they do, they need to leverage that heavily. My recent trip up to the Grand Canyon, there's literally hundreds of miles of road without a DC fast charger. I can't tell you how many Walmarts I drove by, and it's a Willoma's Road is the one where you get off right here. But you'll notice there's a Panda Express, there's a McDonald's, there's a Round Table Pizza, there's a Big Five if you forgot some of your sporting goods. But there are a lot of places to eat and a lot of things to do, and it makes a very convenient stop right off the freeway. But what I was saying is, if you go all around the United States, there are Walmarts off the freeway in almost every major town for that region. Every 30, 40, 50 miles on a freeway, you're likely to run into a Walmart. If EVgo can put even 2 DC fast chargers, even if they're only 50 kilowatts, it doesn't matter. But if they could put 2 at every Walmart location that's off of a freeway, you'd have an instant nationwide infrastructure. In some ways, actually superior to Tesla's and the supercharger network, because that's sort of where the counterbalance is. Tesla does a very good job of giving a wide distribution with a lot of availability per location, and that's important. But you're also limited in a lot of your options. Now, yeah, maybe you wouldn't want to stop at a Walmart, but like I said, there are typically, I don't want to call them parasite businesses, but there are businesses almost as a satellite to just about any Walmart location. But more importantly, it gives you a wider coverage. Having a fast charger every 50 to 60 miles in many ways is better than having 20 fast chargers every 100 miles. It's something to consider, and I think EVgo needs to leverage that relationship. Yes, we are still driving, and I'm about 30 miles out still, and we have about 30%, something like that, a little less maybe, about 25% of the battery still left, my minimum range right now is listed at 45 miles, so I should have a good enough buffer heading in. But just to play off of what I had said earlier, where this is not a knock on Tesla to say that their supercharger network isn't ideal, but I think it's important to remember that what they're doing is based on the current capabilities of their vehicles. So they're in a mindset right now of 200 to 300 mile electric cars. So the Model 3 long range has an EPA, estimated range of a little over 300 miles, but still sort of within that ballpark. The Model S100 still has a bit longer of a range. But what happens is right now, because they're building out that supercharger network to support it, that's sort of the mentality that they're working with. And part of the reason I had mentioned that I think even a nationwide build out of 50 kilowatt chargers will be better is I think long term it's going to be the distribution that matters much more than the concentration at any one location or the actual speed. And the reason I say that is I'm fairly confident that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see regular consumer level vehicles, electric vehicles, with about 500 miles of range per charge. Now, when that happens, like I said, sort of the psychology of what Tesla is building toward will no longer be valid, right? The infrastructure that they build is still going to be used, don't get me wrong, but right now sort of the driving strategy behind it might end up being outdated. And so part of it is just as a thought experiment, consider, right, the implications of a 500-mile vehicle. It means that people will be able to drive basically as far as most people typically drive in a day on a single charge. And that means even if you have someone who's a road warrior, they might need to stop one time to DC fast charge. And even if they do, right, so say you have a family making an 800 or 1,000 mile road trip, if you have 500 miles of range, you make 1 or 2 stops in what would be about 12 to 14 hours of driving, maybe 3 stops. As long as those stops have some sort of fast charging, even 50 kilowatts, you're going to be charging at a rate of close to 200 miles per hour. So even if you stop a total of an hour or 2 with a 500 mile vehicle, electric vehicle, that's an effective range of 700 to 900 miles. Again, more than almost anybody is going to drive in a single day. So what you end up with is, at a certain point, even 50 kilowatts is going to be fast enough, and the bigger need isn't going to be for fast charging, it's going to be for destination charging. And so yeah, these longer range vehicles are going to change the entire dynamic of how we think about traveling, because right now no matter what electric vehicle you're in, your entire trip is built around refueling. That's true even of Teslas. They might have changed the sort of experience by giving it a higher end luxury experience where they sort of hold your hand through the entire process, but really they haven't actually changed the paradigm, which is your entire trip is based on charging location after charging location after charging location until you arrive at your destination. And if that destination is away from home, you're deciding your locale or the point at which you stay based on whether or not they have destination charging. So literally your entire trip is built around, can I recharge and refuel at a location? Someone with a 500 mile electric vehicle doesn't have that same consideration. Yeah, maybe they say I'll stop here because there's a charger, but their trips will not be built around that. So that's an interesting change that happens once you have electric vehicles with ranges that meet or exceed the average range of the current internal combustion engine vehicle. Okay, so here is Selma. I always get lost taking this route in, even with GPS. There's a quick turn and it's down side streets, whatever. Let's see if I can nail it this time. But yeah, so this is more of an ideal stop for me, just in terms of trip speed, in terms of amenities, because there's a restaurant on site. There's kind of leg room to move around. So you basically have all of the amenities you need. And like I said, maybe it's because it's sort of in the middle of nowhere, it feels almost as though fewer people. Yeah, see, I think I always miss this because the turn is right here. But fewer people actually frequent this this charger, it seems like. I think I've seen one Leaf and one i3 in the many times that I've stopped here. So that makes it also a little bit more ideal. Now, who knows? I could end up being blocked this time, and I've seen mixed reports about it. But overall, like I said, it's an ideal stop for me coming out. And now the thing is, because I'll probably be eating dinner here, it's also, I can't remember if I have to yield or they do. Yeah, okay. It's also, you know, I'll probably spend an hour here at least, so that'll get me up to like 80-ish%, which will get me onto Galt, California, which will be my last stop before my destination. And so there's benefits in only making 2 stops, because each time you stop, look at this is technically the same as trying to exit the freeway. The freeway, I think, might be a little bit faster, but you have to make multiple lefts, where a lot of this is, I said multiple lefts on lights, where a lot of this is actually either stop signs or a left with traffic, right? But I guess this is a part that can be kind of precarious. But yeah, each time you stop, even if it's right off of the intersection or freeway or whatever, you have to activate the charger, you have to locate it in a parking lot. It eats up time. So even though the charge rate is lower at a higher state of charge, or the charging rate, I should say, is lower at a higher state of charge, it's compensated for by not having to make that additional stop, right? So it's just all about timing and maximizing your battery if you want the fastest trip times possible. And you know, I'm arriving here, it's in orange, which means, hey, you know, you're getting low, but I'm not that low. I'm fine. In fact, now I know where I am. I can come through and yeah, and see here, I'm actually gonna back in. Like, they're respecting the spots, but notice, well, they're not respecting the level 2 so much. Well, actually, there is a Fiat 500e parked there, so I'm guessing they found access. But I'm gonna park so I can exit quickly too. But it's fairly crowded right now, so but yeah, the truck isn't really blocking it, so that's good. Should be able to reach. But yeah, so there's my energy screen. Sweet. Oh wow, and it says the Chatimo is not functioning. Well, actually, that's I wouldn't normally know this, but it's actually good now that I took this spot, because if a Leaf comes along, they're not going to be able to charge, at least not on this tower. So hopefully the other one is okay. So yeah, here we are, 10% battery. That's fine. It's not giving me an estimate. Let me see. And normally this lights up. Come on. So, okay, the tower just gave me an estimate of an hour to 80%. And let's see if I can get this. Complete by 8:58. So this is giving it a little bit more than an hour. I'll check just so I make sure I remember what the mileage is to Galt, but I don't think. Grab my wallet because I am gonna get dinner. Whew, lots of trucks, busy stop. But I'm gonna probably try to use the app. Okay, so this Chatamo is working. I am gonna use the app, I think, to reactivate during dinner. So go grab something. Who knows? The restaurant might be actually pretty crowded. All right.